Ice Cube's Big 3 is back. The most competitive basketball league on earth is on CBS this Saturday. Big 3 All-Star Dwight Howard and the LA Riot take on Greg Monroe and the Dallas Power. Then Coach Rick Mahorn, Sensation Nazir Kaur, and the Detroit Amps look to protect home court against back-to-back MVP Michael Beasley and the defending champs Miami 305. The game played the way you love. Watch live Saturday on CBS at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and catch replays on BET.
Oh, yay, yay!
DJ PK, we're joined now by Matt Tait, covering the Kansas Jayhawks for R1S1 Sports and Wave the Wheat. Matt, good morning.
Good morning. How we doing, fellas?
Well, everyone here is all fired up about the draft. They finally know who the Jazz are getting. There was lots of drama and twists and turns and wondering. And I bet you hear me say there was lots of twists and turns, and you think that dude has no idea.
Yeah, that's fair. I just talked with your producer. He said you're ready to talk some Darryn Peterson, and I said always, because I talked a ton of Darryn Peterson in the last 10 months, good, bad, and otherwise. But you know, Utah got an absolute stud. I've been doing this a long time. I've covered pretty much every one and done player who's come through Kansas under Self. I've seen some divas. I've seen some, diamonds in the rough. I've seen all kinds of different players and everything in between that. And I honestly don't know that I've enjoyed one quite as much as I enjoyed Darryn Peterson. That's not to say he's my favorite player I've ever covered. There's 4-year guys that you build relationships with and you watch them grow up, and those kinds of things definitely make a difference in your ability to get to know people. But as far as the one and dones with the most hype and all the buzz that came with that guy, the outside perception honestly couldn't be more off. Utah got a stud, they got a star, they got a great human being, and he's going to show it, and the organization and the fans are going to love it.
Clearly, with the Kansas fans and probably with the coaches and all that, there was some frustration when he wasn't playing as much as anticipated, and he took himself out, certainly in that BYU game in the second half. I'm wondering, how did you see his demeanor in terms of how he handled that? Because there was a lot of heavy criticism directed at that situation. Yeah,
there was, and you've heard the Kobe comparisons, and obviously that's high praise and a little bit crazy in a lot of ways because, Kobe's a top 2, top 3 player of all time. So I get why people kind of shake their head or tilt their head when they hear that. But I do think that, and I wrote this morning, one of Darren's biggest Kobe traits, I think, is just the thick skin, man. He let all of that roll off his back. I mean, obviously it gets to a point where it bothers you. I don't care who you are, and I don't care what we're talking about. I mean, when you get criticized literally after every game you play or don't play, at some point it's going to bother you. But we never saw it boil over. We never saw it, really get to him. We never saw him explode. We never saw him, fight back. We never saw him, want to yell at anybody or show frustration. I mean, he just kind of shrugged every time it got brought up or every time he was asked directly about it, and he said that's their opinion, I'm comfortable with who I am, or that's how they feel. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't think about the noise. I don't care about that stuff. I mean, he handled it like a very mature young man, and certainly more than you'd expect from a college freshman. So it was frustrating. It was frustrating for everyone involved, and that includes Darryn. I mean, I don't know how many times we heard Bill Self or Darryn himself say, if he could be out there, he would. And it was killing him to not play. And I think the narrative became, well, he doesn't care about basketball. It doesn't matter to him. It doesn't mean as much. This is not something he's committed to. All of that stuff's crazy. It really is. I mean, this guy lives and breathes basketball. It's all he knows. It's all he does. It's all he cares about. And so even though he didn't show it, and I credit him for not showing it, because a lot of guys would melt down in that situation or certainly let it boil over. Even though he didn't show that, which some people wanted, to see some fire, to see some frustration, they wanted to see him kick a chair, or whatever it would be. I know it ate at him. I know it killed him. I know he would have rather been out there than not. And so there's a lot that went into it. Some of it, injury related, some of it mental, some of it a combination of the two. There was a lot that went into that whole thing, that whole season. But the bottom line is, the guy wanted to play. And one of the things I judged the most, man, sort of when this all was happening was, the fans and KU Twitter and everything were melting down themselves and freaking out and criticizing him and calling him this and calling him that. And it reached the national level. I mean, you had Stephen A. calling him that. You had Kendrick Perkins calling him that. I mean, it was at a national level at one point. I think it was over All-Star Weekend in the NBA, so that helped too because they didn't have as much to talk about elsewhere. But one of the things that I always looked at and one of the things that always meant the most to me in terms of evaluating the situation for what it really was is the fact that Darryn Peterson's teammates weren't bothered by it at all. They loved the guy. They cared about him. They supported him. And, yeah, they wanted him out there. But it wasn't like he was some diva and they were tired of it. And it was the Darryn Peterson show, and they were just afterthoughts. I mean, he immersed himself in the culture. He cared about his teammates, and they cared about him. And for my money, that's the kind of stuff you get drafted on. I mean, that's the kind. You can play ball. Everybody can put the basket or the ball in the basket. But when you're looking to build a franchise or you're looking for a franchise type of player like you can get at the number 2 position in the draft, to me, that's the kind of thing you want to look at. And Darren's got all that stuff in spades. He's a phenomenal teammate, and he will fit in great there.
You've touched on a couple things right there when you say phenomenal teammate. I'm curious, when the Jazz did their homework and they talked to his teammates at Kansas, what do you think they heard?
I think they heard, most likely, man, those guys probably talked about his talent because day one when he got to Lawrence and first set foot on campus as a member of the team and a student at KU, those guys were marveling at what he could do. I mean, it didn't matter if they were starters, didn't matter if they were walk-ons, it didn't matter who they were. Every time we got to talk to somebody about him, they were like, I've never seen anybody do what he does. And so as much as I think, if they dove deeper and asked him about, okay, how was he in the locker room? How was he during timeouts? How was he at the dorm and things like that? I'm sure they had a glowing review for him there too. They hung out together. They spent time together, meaningful time. It wasn't like Darryn was just here on a stopover. He's got friends here that probably aren't going to play at the next level that he'll be friends with for a long time. And he talked about that in the locker room after their loss to St. John's in the NCAA tournament. I mean, he said it meant the world to him to come to Kansas, and he's got lifelong friends and guys he's gonna be in their weddings and things like that. I mean, maybe that all sounds good, but to me, Darren's not the kind of guy that's going to say stuff just to say stuff. He's going to say what he means, and he always did. And so I think that stuff would come out, but I definitely think the first thing every one of those guys would talk about is just how freaking talented he is. It wowed them, and those were some pretty good players too. But they made it very clear from minute one that what they were seeing, what they were playing with, who this guy was unlike anything they'd ever seen.
Ice Cube's Big 3 is back. The most competitive basketball league on earth is on CBS this Saturday. Big 3 All-Star Dwight Howard and the LA Riot take on Greg Monroe and the Dallas Power. Then Coach Rick Mahorn, Sensation Nazir Kaur, and the Detroit Amps look to protect home court against back-to-back MVP Michael Beasley and the defending champs Miami 305. The game played the way you love. Watch live Saturday on CBS at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and catch replays on BET.
Oh, yay!
After he was drafted, we had an opportunity to interview him on the telephone, and I asked him a question about, having motivation of not going number 1. I'm going to play you his response, and then I want you to respond to it.
Now I'm with the Jazz, and I'm super excited to get there. And it'll definitely keep a chip on my shoulder throughout my whole career, and I'll take it out on everybody, not just that guy in particular.
Go ahead.
I love it. I saw you guys tweet that last night. I mixed it into my story actually because it's perfect. It's him. It's funny too because I asked Bill Self the same thing after the draft or after Darryn was picked. I said, is he the kind of player or person that's going to use that as motivation and fuel, being slighted and not being taken number 1 and classic self, he said, well, first of all, I have a hard time saying that if you go number 2 in the draft, you were slighted, so I'm not going to go there is basically what he said. But he did say, I do know the kid well enough to know that he will find and use anything out there for motivation to help him in the future. And so I love the comment. I think that's exactly right. I think that I was only around him a year and not around him a ton, but enough to truly get a feel for who he is. He's a killer, and that's not just words. That's not just a soundbite. That's not just something that he thought would sound good and make everybody laugh or smile or whatever. I think he means it. And, again, that's the Kobe comp, right? That's you could beat Kobe in a game of pool in the summer when no one else was in the bar and it didn't matter and there wasn't any money on the line and he was playing left-handed, and he would still remember that the next time he played you, and he would try to take it out on you then. Darren's not quite there yet. I do want to hesitate to completely make that comp because Kobe was one of one, I think. But Darryn is inspired by that, and he's studied that, and he wants to be that same way. And so I think that I think he means it. I think he wants to be the best at everything he does. And so throughout this point in his career, that's meant, being the best in high school. That's meant being the best in his draft class. That's meant being the best in college. That obviously didn't work out because of all the circumstances and injuries and issues that he had. But, even with that said, man, he played a lot of games where he didn't really play the second half, as you mentioned in that BYU game, and the guy still averaged 20 points a game. He was not a liability. It was an issue, and it was something they had to work through, and Self had to learn how to coach kind of 2 different teams, really. But man, when he was in the game, he put up numbers, and so it's an efficiency thing with him, and if he is able to stay healthy and meet that goal like he talked about last night of playing all 82 games and all of that stuff, I mean, his numbers are going to be phenomenal. But it will be that, on any given night, his motivation will be, I want to show up and I want to be the best player in the gym. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if LeBron's there. It doesn't matter if Joker's there. It doesn't matter if whoever's there. His goal will be to, make sure he puts on enough of a show and shows people that that dude's the best player on the court. And, he won't succeed every night. We know that. But when that's your motivation and that's how you're driven and that's what you want, man, it tends to produce good things more often than not. And as long as he can stay healthy and be supported and be developed and continue the ride that he's on, so to speak, he's just going to keep getting better. That's the crazy thing. I mean, they got a heck of a player, and there's no doubt in my mind that 2, 3, 4 years from now, he'll be even better because that's what happens. He's still young, and he's just now reaching the NBA level, and he'll have to get better to do what he wants to do there.
Matt, when you heard the whole creatine explanation for why things went so bizarrely, how did that land with you, and what did you hear when you started asking around about it? Because I bet you were asking around about it.
Yeah, it made sense in a sense, I guess. It always seemed like it was something that we weren't hearing about. It always seemed like there was something else here, and obviously a lot of people jumped to the load management thing and that his agent or his camp or his family or whoever was telling him when to come out and when not to play and all that stuff. And who knows, maybe that was true. I mean, I wouldn't say that's crazy either. I mean, I think that, and I wrote this a few times too, like, I think that if it were me or my son, I probably would have handled it very much the same way. I might have been a little more transparent with it. I think that's where they kind of misstepped. I think they could have come out and said, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why. And when you bring a kid up from age 4, 5, 6 all the way through middle school and high school, and the spotlight, he's been under the spotlight, and the microscope's been on him throughout that whole time. I mean, he was the best 8th grader. He was the best, 16-year-old. He was the best in his high school class, right? I mean, this has been a life's journey for him. And so they were doing all of that work, all of that extra stuff, everything he put into it. to get to this level, to be an NBA player, to make it to the league. And so when you get to the point where you're 10 months away from reaching that goal, I don't think I would push any kind of injury either. I don't think I would ask my son to do that either. I mean, I think that's where it kind of became one of those things where it grew a life of its own, it being the story, because if they were protecting him, or if he was, mentally protecting himself even, I don't know that there's a whole lot of people that would complain about that, as long as you just went out and said it. And that was the issue. They didn't really say it. And so the creatine thing, sure. I mean, if that was part of it, then that kind of falls into that same category for me. Like, it would have been great to hear about that when it was all going on, back in January or whatever it would have been. So that was a little confusing to me. Having said that, though, it did make sense, because it was one of the strangest things I've ever seen, because again, I've been doing this a long time, and I've known Bill Self for a long time, and you want to talk about another straight shooter. Self doesn't say anything just to say it, and for 2 years, maybe longer, he spent any opportunity he could find talking this guy up as the most talented, best player they've ever recruited to Kansas. There were times during the 24-25 season, when Darryn was still a senior in high school, when we would have a post-game press conference or a midweek press conference with Self, and once it was over, however long, 15 minutes or whatever it was, at the end of it, if nobody brought up Darryn, or if he didn't bring up Darryn, he would say, "Guys, no questions about Darryn?" I mean, this dude was so ready to coach this guy. And again, he doesn't just, blow guys up like that for no reason. He doesn't build the hype like that for no reason. In fact, he does the opposite. Self will be the first to downplay anybody or tear a guy down before he builds him back up and all of that stuff. So the fact that for 2+ years we heard about how great Darryn was, and then we had to watch him, show flashes of it, but also not be kind of as advertised, not quite be that guy that we had heard about for 2 years. I mean, it made me think from the very beginning that something has to be going on, because it had to be about more than just the mental side of it, or whatever load management anybody wants to say, or whatever that was. I mean, there had to be something that was affecting him physically and affecting his explosiveness, because I saw, enough in high school, and obviously Self saw a ton, to know that the guy we were seeing was way more cautious out there than the guy who just let it go and was trying to dunk on everybody's head and was trying to, kill the game and embarrass people in the process. We saw that on a very few occasions during his time at Kansas, but it was very limited and few and far between, and so that made me think that this has to be more than just a mental thing. I think the mental part of it was huge, but there had to be something. So it made sense to me. I know there's still people out there that don't buy it, and that's fine too. I think it's all water under the bridge now. None of it matters, right? He's reached this point, and now he kind of gets a clean slate, and I think he recognizes that. I think he realizes that, and I think knowing him the little that I do, I think he's over the moon about the opportunity to start fresh and show people who he is. And he talked about that, right? When he's talking about playing Summer League, he said, I want to show everybody that I'm back. So not only did Utah get an incredibly talented player, but they got an incredibly motivated guy too. And when you put those two things together, it's hard not to see great things in his future, and probably pretty immediately. I mean, Self said last night, when you talk about what does it look like in 10 years, he said, I think we're talking about an 8-time All-Star. So, that's incredible. I mean, there aren't very many guys that jump into the league and in their first 10 years are in the All-Star game 8 times. I mean, you guys follow the division, especially. I mean, Jamal Murray's an unbelievable player for the Nuggets. He was an All-Star for the first time this year, so All-Star stuff is a serious ceiling, and if Self's right about that, it's going to be unbelievable. And I still think he should have gone number one. There's no doubt in my mind that's who I would have taken, and that's not a knock on AJ. That's just I think Darryn is in a class of his own. I think that you can put the ball in his hands and he can change the game and change a team immediately. And I think, AJ is going to be phenomenal. He's going to have a great NBA career. I think he's an incredible player, but I think he needs help to get to that level. He's not the, ball dominant playmaking kind of guy. I mean, he can make plays, but other people have to help him make plays way more than Darryn. So I can't wait. I'm going to watch a lot of Utah basketball. I'm excited to see what he looks like. And from everyone I've talked to and everything I've heard, and obviously including, stuff from him last night, it seems like a great fit. And more importantly, my hat's off to him for showing genuine excitement. This isn't an act. This isn't a show. I don't think he's devastated that he didn't go one. I think that was a goal. I think he would have loved to be the number one pick just for the, add it to the resume kind of thing. But I think he sees that this Utah opportunity is a really good thing for him. And I think every time you hear him say he can't wait to be there and he's happy to be there, I think you should take that at face value, because I think that's exactly right. This guy does not say things that he doesn't mean. In fact, one more quick story as I'm rambling here. After the loss to St. John's in the second round of the NCAA tournament, we were out in San Diego and, open locker room, and some of the TV cameras were asking Darryn, what are you going to remember about your only year at Kansas? And he said, I don't know if it's my only year. And, of course, everybody's like, what? Come on, man. And I think a lot of people in the room and crowded around him then kind of rolled their eyes like, here we go again. Another, ridiculous thing coming out of the Darryn Peterson story. And so everybody kind of moved on and went to shoot their shots or hit their deadlines or whatever. And I circled back when the locker room was almost empty and our clock was almost out. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, what saying that means? Like, why did you say that? That someone's going to tweet it out and it's going to take on a life of its own and it's going to be this whole thing. And I said, I know you're smart enough to know that saying that produces a result that's going to add more to the story. And I said, so I'm just curious why you said it. And he goes, because right now that's the truth. And I say the truth. He said, I'm going to sit down with my family and we're going to talk about what's next. And if what's next is if what's best for me is to come back to Kansas, then that's what I'll do. And if not, then I'll go pro. And I'm sure in that moment, even he knew, he had to know that the NBA was the next step. He had to know that. But I think I love that story because I think it shows that this is a guy who is, you always hear people talking about living where their feet are and being very present in the moment. And that instance and several others show that that's exactly who Darryn is. I mean, to almost to a fault. I mean, he genuinely meant in that moment he didn't know if it was his last because they hadn't talked about it yet. So pretty cool story, pretty cool moment. And again, just a raw and real and honest dude. And I don't see him changing.
Matt, we appreciate the time and all the stories. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again.
That sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Matt Tait covering the Kansas Jayhawks for R1S1 Sports and Wave the Wheat.